It's not the time to be comfortable in your job.
No, not at all.
It's a really big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it a good idea? I don't know.
Yeah, probably not at first. It'll be a better idea.
That doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. It's coming. Coding agents actually build more secure code than humans do. They'll lose their entire life savings, and that's it for them. There's no recovery.
Yep.
We just accept that. We're just somehow okay with that. That is like complete economic warfare.
Hello and welcome back to Threats, Pitfalls, and Risk Myths, the TPRM podcast. My guest today is the one and only Alex Stamos. Now, he's been the CISO at world-renowned companies like Yahoo, Facebook, SentinelOne. He was the founding director of the Stanford Internet Observatory, founder of ISEC Partners, and the Krebs Stamos Group. And for those in the know, he was a part of At Stake, the OG elite digital security company whose employees went on to shape much of the industry as we know it today. He's now the chief product officer over at Corridor, where he's building the tooling to ensure that the world is ready for a reality where most of the code is going to be written by agents. This is a really wide-ranging episode. We got into things like the second-order effects that are going to occur when writing an exploit costs nothing and a kid in St. Petersburg has access to the same tools as advanced nation-states. We also dive into the reality most boards want to find ways to cut a fifth of their employees with AI fairy dust. Stick around if you want to hear why Alex thinks we might be headed for a new AI-powered French Revolution, and he drops some career advice on what you can do about it. This is a great episode with some dark twists and a whole lot of entertaining snark and commentary. So let's get into it.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Threats, Pitfalls, and Risk Myths, the TPRM podcast. I'm here with Alex Stamos as our guest today. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
Although I guess I'm joining you now since I'm in your fabulous offices here.
Yeah, thanks for coming to the office.
Oh, great. And for those that don't know, Alex, I don't know if you need much of an introduction, but you've been CISO at Yahoo, Facebook, running the Stanford Internet Observatory. You're teaching there.
Yeah.
Now running product. I hear you're excellent at hanging televisions and painting walls here at Corridor as well.
Hey, you got to do everything, man. That's the start of life.
And maybe for those that don't know, because you've been working at Corridor and you and Jack have been starting the company and working on a lot of the interesting problems that we have around AppSec and development, especially in agentic era. Do you want to maybe just chat a bit about that?
Yeah, well, Corridor got started early last year by two of my former students, Jack Cable and Ashwin Ramaswamy. Their goal was to apply AI to the hardest problems in software security. I was one of their first investors. They came to me, right after the election. It was pretty clear that Jack wasn't going to be sticking around CISA. Ashwin had actually run for election in Georgia for state senate. He came shockingly close to winning and beating a election denier, but unfortunately did not win in his red district in Georgia. That would have been kind of cool. So they were looking to turn lemons into lemonade and decided to start a company. I was happy to be their first check and was their advisor. And then when they were doing a great job in what they were building, and I was so impressed, looked like they were having a lot of fun, I decided to leave being a public company CISO and join them full-time last summer.
Oh, perfect.
We're building a product that plugs into coding agents, watches what it does, provides that telemetry to CISOs and VPs of engineering, and then helps it build code that actually fits to what a company does. From my perspective, and I'm sure we can talk about this, coding agents actually build more secure code than humans do. For the most part. It's generally not good at understanding the context in which, especially larger enterprises want code to be built. So we index your code base, we understand those things, and then we help companies build out, like, how do you want to do secret storage? How do you want to do service to service auth? Like, what are if you're a medical institution, how do you want to handle PHI? And so we watch how the coding agents is building things. We inject advice in real time. And then especially now with autonomous agents, we do a bunch of work to make that safer.
Yeah, and I think that's something a lot of people are hitting and finding out, because like everybody I talk to is like, oh, well, I could build that with one shot. I just have it build it. And like, yes, you can do that.
You can.
And it will
Can's
work.
a big word.
Yeah. It'll work, I think that like it gets to the whole Pareto principle just becomes more and more true. I like the 80% of getting it done is super easy and you can get it, it works, but there's that last 20% becomes much more important, I think, now in a world where you're building with agents. Perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think it ends up being that with agents, like that last 20% is where a lot of the value ends up accumulating. But for you all, I mean, how did you, when you think about the problem of building with agents, I mean, how did you come to that direction of how you want to be involved with it? Because there's a lot of different places that people are kind of interjecting different products to try to build secure code and run things securely. Like, what was the sort of thinking that got you there?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly trying to listen to customers and build what they need, right?
Mhm.
Like, the product is constantly changing based upon where software development is going.
Yep.
And it will be different in 6 months because how people write code. One of, I think, the advantages we have is that we're here in the 49 square miles of San Francisco, or realistically the couple of square miles.
I was going to say, you could probably narrow it down even more.
Right. People are not doing tons of, some people are doing cutting edge software development out in the sunset at home.
It's in between surfing.
Right, exactly. But they're working for companies here on their work from home days. But, in the very handful of blocks here, the future is being written, right? And that's actually one of our kind of product design strategies here, is that you can see like 5 of our customers from that window right there. We're a couple of them we have logo rights for, so you can look them up of who those ones are. And the idea is, if we design for what they are doing today in June 2026, that is how a Midwest hospital chain will be writing code at the end of this year. Right. Yeah. And so, with autonomous agents, like right now, those customers are writing code by having their employees right around doing their one-on-ones, walking around Salesforce Park, right on the top of that of the Transbay building.
They got to move every now and then.
And really so
bad for your body.
Right. They're doing their one-on-one. They're walking around the park and they're one-shotting by doing cursor or at Claude on Slack.
And you got to keep the tokens burning.
Right, exactly. Like I'm not costing enough money to make. Right. And so it's like, oh, switch the Fable. I could 10 times the sucker. Boom, boom, boom. And they do an at cursor on Slack on their phone, and then that might get merged without ever human review. Right. That is not how Medical Partners of Wisconsin is doing software.
In fact, that's terrifying for most everyone except for the people, and even a lot of the people here are not quite on board with that.
But by mid next year, that's how everybody's going to do software development, with a couple of exceptions, but almost everybody will do software development. It is inescapable that is going to be the only way that you'll be allowed to do it from a cost.
Because it's so inefficient otherwise.
Yes. And your competitors will, right? Like if not your big competitor, some tiny little competitor will do it. And I was a CIO last year, and already last year, our board of directors was like, how can we get rid of 20% of our employees with AI? Right.
Of course, that was, they couldn't think of any other way to phrase it.
Not right. No, they did not exactly say that. Like, I'm not, that was not the exact words of that. Sure. But everybody knew what they were saying. I mean, yes, it was in Wall Street Journal speak. Like, how do we capture efficiencies of
lots of value to be captured?
Yes. But like, that is exactly how every CIO and chief digital officer and CEO is being braced by board members right now as like, how do we get more money out of our stock by getting rid of all the employees? And that is going to include, I want to, I have heard from my friends on other boards that they are writing code with these autonomous agents and they're merging. And so if we can figure out how to make that work for these folks, then that is something that we believe we can help enable. And is it a good idea? I don't know.
Probably not at first. It'll be a better idea.
That doesn't matter if it's a good idea or not. It's coming. And so we, those of us who work in security and trust and compliance have to find a way to make that as good an idea as possible.
And I think, and this is where I think it's fun and super interesting for you and everybody else is we don't know what the right answer is.
Yes.
But we do know it's coming and we know it's happening. It's like, and everybody's experimenting and trying all these different things.
There's
to
something
make it
freeing
work.
about it as a
Yeah.
security person. Like, as a security person, you're kind of trained to say no. You're trained to point out the downsides or whatever. And the AI revolution has meant that security people are just getting overruled everywhere.
Like, you can't say no because
Right.
you're the person who's on the outs.
And so there's something freeing about that
Yeah.
of like, you're just going to lose. So now just do the best you can.
Yeah.
There's something nice about that. Now, I mean, if you're not the public company CISO, like it's
Yeah.
kind of rough if you're the public company CISO because Starbucks hasn't changed,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like the actual rules, it feels like there's no rules right now, but there will be a functional
Yeah.
SEC again in like 30 months. So it will be a little rough to be a public company CISO when,
You
the
still have to
lawyers come
answer
back.
for all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, this may be a slight tangent, but what for the people that are on the 20% where they will be value captured somewhere?
Yeah.
I mean, what advice do you have for folks like that? Because I think like there is room for everyone to be working, but the problem is it's going to be the 20% least efficient people that they're going to want to move on with.
Yeah. I mean, this is tough. I just finished I was making you wait while you were setting up because I was actually submitting my grades for my class. And my penultimate lecture for my class was my career advice to my students. I call it Uncle Alex's career advice because I started teaching Stanford 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, it was biologically possible for my students to be my children, but that would have been scandalous.
Yep.
And now it's just like
That's
straight
right.
up not scandalous, right? Yeah. It's like I actually have a college sophomore as a child. So it's like, but I still call it Uncle Alex's career advice. But yeah, I was talking to my students about this of like how they should be thinking about AI. And it's kind of a crazy year because there's huge demand in some cases. There's this New York Times article about the demand for security people and CISOs in particular. I mean, I have never gotten more calls from recruiters.
Yep.
I'm sure you get it all the time. I was just at a dinner with a recruiter with a bunch of CISOs, and we're all joking with the recruiter of like, "Hey, would you like us all just to change jobs?"
And
so
then they take a commission on all. Yeah, like if
everybody
we get a really
musical
good
cheers.
cheers.
I mean, there's incredible demand for security people right now because AI is great, but for experienced security people.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And
Not a great time to be a college graduate.
it's not a great time. Yeah. But I was talking to a friend of mine who I'm not going to out her, but like a very well-respected security person at a very large tech company. And she said that large tech company had over pivoted on not hiring college grads and they're going back, right? Like they have realized that they had created this skill gap in the company and now they'd have to backfill. Of my 115 students, every year I collect resumes. I got 49 resumes out of 115 Stanford students.
Yep.
That is a record ratio.
Because they just can't find stuff and they're like,
it's hard. I mean, or what's happened is even I've got full-time grads who are taking internships in June, right?
Okay,
so they've got 6-month or 9-month things, but they don't have 5-year jobs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's unique among Stanford students for me. So what to do? I mean, I do truly believe that in the long run, AI will create more economic growth.
Yep.
It will create more economic opportunity. I think also our society is not structured to capture that in a way that's fair, right? Like
not at all.
a trillionaire was created today. How much of that $1 trillion is going to be captured by our government, which has record debt, and then redistribute it to the people.
Trickle down to everyone is.
Yeah. You think so? You feel like that's going to trickle down? Not so much.
That's what I was told.
Yeah, not so much. No, I mean, what's definitely what trickles down is the the noxious oxides that trickle out of the generators outside those. The data centers that do build the unlicensed cogeneration plants. No, look, I just we're creating all this wealth that doesn't get captured, and the 100 billionaires who I think are more thoughtful about this do talk about UBI and all this, but then nothing actually comes of it.
Yeah.
And from what I see, I mean, we're on the edge of a French Revolution kind of
what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And
it'd be great to avoid that because from what I understand, that was not so pleasant.
It was no bueno. Yeah. And there's a bunch of people who are closer to you and me than the bill. I mean, like there's you and I are down here and the billionaires are and the 1 trillionaire up there.
Yeah.
And there's guys like you and me who are like, oh yeah, when the French Revolution comes,
I'm a man of the people.
we're the man of the people. But realistically, we would also be up against the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because we're on a podcast about AI, right?
Yep,
and
yep.
like they'll be rolling the tape.
Note for the future.
Yeah, exactly.
We're about the people.
Yeah, right, exactly. But you know, if I remember anything about the French Revolution, a lot of people who were
Not a lot of forgiveness.
not a lot of forgiveness, and you know, there's a lot of people who were first pulling the string on the guillotine who ended up in it.
Yeah.
And I am really worried about that. That our society is not structured to help those who are going to lose out on this.
Yep.
And we are going to create all this chances for entrepreneurship, but it's going to take a while for that.
Yep.
And the people who are going to lose out in the short term, like
There's a generational gap where there's just people aren't.
and if
necessarily
that
ready.
takes 5 years, like what happens to people in those 5 years?
Yep.
Like we don't have the social safety net to help people 5 years. You can't wait for 5 years without a job or like working at McDonald's for 5. I mean, like
Yep.
we're not ready for that, right? Like, and underemployment or unemployment for 5 years is a terrible, terrible thing.
Yep, and it snowballs to everyone at that point.
Yeah, and like I think historically, like societies that have large numbers of underemployed or unemployed angry young men, that like doesn't really work out. Like
It does not.
there are, you know, people like Mao who have found that that's helpful to them, right? Like
We'll just get re-educated on a farm, and I think we'll be,
yeah, no, it's good.
ready to go. Yeah.
I for one am looking forward to my time wearing a dunce's cap and then
Yeah.
working on a farm. So yeah, I'm actually really worried about what happens. You know, if we've got like 80 years of industrial revolution, that's going to happen in 10 or 15.
Yeah, I think
like,
that's
gonna
the
be
thing
rough.
people don't like. Is they say, well, this has happened before, over and over, and it's like yes, but not in the compressed
Right, and then what
time.
happened after the 80 years of industrial revolution? You had a guy named Marx
Yeah.
and somebody named Lenin, right? And how did that work out for folks?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah,
And even with that, I mean, that didn't get distributed to everybody, all at once. Like right now, it's suddenly AI everywhere for everyone,
right.
all at the same time.
Right, AI guys read a history book challenge.
Mhm.
Nuts.
I'll just have it summarize it for me.
Right. Hey,
Obviously.
ask Claude how well the Industrial Revolution worked out for the owners of the means of production, and for some it worked out great. There are other ones who, yes, my siblings are named after the Romanovs, so perhaps I'm a little, or like Alexander, Anastasia, Nicholas, and Peter.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
like I sometimes ask my parents like how smart that was.
And
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll be able to explain that very clearly in the future.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, so for people that are building right now, I mean, are there things that like, whether it's skills or it seems like way of thinking about things and just experimenting with tools, other things that you generally recommend to people or your students when, like, how do you prepare for what's coming?
Well, I mean, for the older folks, I think you have to get hands on. I think this is actually an interesting generational thing that like young people are
Yep.
hands on, right? Like all of those students are AI natives.
Yep.
I think it's where I also see a huge problem is I have a number of colleagues my age who are also now having career challenges because they haven't stayed up to date. I mean,
Yep.
that is one of the reasons I was motivated.
It's not the time to be comfortable in your job. I
No,
think is,
not at
is
all.
a really big thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And I think, I mean, this is advice I give to my students is like, if you are comfortable, you're decaying, right? In any career, in any field.
Yep.
That was always true in tech, but because of
It's so
AI,
true
it's
now.
true everywhere.
Yep.
Right.
And doubly so, I think, in tech. If you're in any way not uncomfortable about how far you're pushing yourself, it's probably you should be pushing yourself further and harder.
Yeah,
because there's just so much to learn and so much to think about. Well, going back to some of the Vuln stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it did change a lot about not only how things are being developed right now, like we were talking about, like eventually getting to pull requests and code being merged without humans looking at it. But it's also changed a lot of the economics. And I was talking about this on the last episode, but the cost of a vulnerability, the cost of generating code is kind of approaching towards zero. Same for finding vulnerabilities. I mean, still there's a cost, but compared to what any of it was 2 years ago, I mean, we're an order of magnitude or maybe even 2 orders of magnitude cheaper when it comes to these. What are the implications of that?
Yeah, the cost of finding vulns and then especially of creating, I think, and we're only at the start of this. I think we're in the middle of finding vulns.
Yeah.
And we're at the very start of writing reliable exploits.
Yep.
Right. Like that we're at the very start of, because it's hard to get the foundation models to write reliable exploits for you because they do have protections, but people are just starting to get the Chinese models to write exploits for them. And as people get good at building LoRa's and retraining the the Kimmies and the Quents and
yep.
such to write shellcode, that is where I think things get brutal.
Yeah.
Because like people have always found bugs in C++ and other exploitable. One, like people have always found bugs in web code, and like writing exploits for web stuff has always been easy.
Yep.
The trick has always been like turning a really bizarre use after free bug
into a chainable exploit.
Into a chainable exploit in like fully patched, Windows 64-bit, Windows 11.
Yeah.
Like that kind of Dave Vitale shit is super hard, right? Like
because there's only a few people in the world that have the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to do that.
Right. And that's why, you've got the people who do that end up buying llama farms in Australia and writing exploits for the Five Eyes.
Yep.
Not to name anybody specific that I just hinted towards, but yes. Right. But those like, and you're like, or, they're working in a factory for that, for the Ministry of State Security.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like, but thank God for most part of those people have been very rare. And now if that becomes something that like the next tier down, I mean, we used to only have.
Not even if though, right? I mean, this is just a matter of time, and it's not even that much time if we think.
It might be now.
It might be now, and even, but 2 years from now, for sure, you could take Chinese models; they'll be obliterated against all their guardrails, and that's going to be people have access to this.
The way I've been talking to people about it for I think a while, for maybe a couple years now, is like all of the offensive groups are. It's like the Premier League, right?
Yeah.
Like, just for the rest of our American listeners here, like in UK football, soccer, everybody should know this because they watch.
Watching World Cup for right now.
Right. Yeah.
We're all experts for at least 3 more weeks.
So if your team sucks, if they lose a lot of games, they get sent down, right, to a lower level. And if you do really well, you can get sent up. And the Premier League is the premier, the top, right? So you get relegated. The term's relegated.
Thanks to Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso, right? That's how everybody knows about this. Yeah, exactly. So everybody's going to get sent up a league, right? Like, so, if you think about like Pakistan and India, like they have for the most part not used O'Day. They have
because they don't have the capability.
They don't have the capability, right? So like India has Appin, and they have a couple other like domestic exploit development shops, but for the most part, those guys are not spinning out brand new exploits, and to the extent that they are, those things are hoarded and used extremely carefully.
Yep.
Now they are going to be finding stuff every day, every week,
and everyone is,
right? But like the Indians are going to be nuking the Pakistanis all the time with O'Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is going to completely change what cyber warfare looks like between India and Pakistan. That they are now going to have capabilities that used to be reserved for like the SVR and the MSS and Cyber Command, who had a equilibrium and a relationship between those three organizations that is very different than the relationship between India and Pakistan, right? Or Saudi Arabia and Iran,
and non-state actors,
just
don't care.
Yeah, and so if all of a sudden the Iranians and the Pakistanis and the Indians and the North Koreans have the same capabilities that used to be reserved for the MSS and the SVR, that is a very big difference. Or like you said, teenagers in St. Petersburg, who used to have to rely upon a 4-week-old exploit or reused credentials or something, off the shelf, which they were pretty successful with. But think about how successful they are if they can just waltz through your Palo Alto firewall with some kind of brand
something
new,
never been seen,
that's never been seen, and that you can't patch against. Yeah. And so this is a big deal because the number of organizations that have actually had to stand up against real zero day is actually quite tiny.
I know people worry about it, and I'm like, I don't think anyone's burning that on you. Do you know what those cost?
Yeah. It's like, oh, are you Lockheed Martin? You're not Lockheed Martin. Yeah. Are you ExxonMobil? No.
People get a little precious about their source code that I'm like, I don't think anyone wants.
Yeah, but now it's like you could be like, just a reasonably sized company that has enough money to pay $1 million ransom, and like, absolutely, they're going to burn that on you because
it didn't cost them anything.
It cost them nothing. They got that out of Kimmy 3 or whatever, right?
Like, running on a Mac Mini under the desk.
Yeah, exactly. This is like a guy's weekend to write that exploit.
He's actually out fishing, but the agent is
right,
great.
exactly. He was out with Svetlana at the club,
Yeah.
and he got a text message from his Mac Mini
Yeah, it's like,
saying,
"Oh,
"I found one."
it's
He's like,
done.
"Oh, great job,
Another
Open
bottle."
Claw." Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Get it going.
Yeah.
Get it going.
Svetlana's gonna have a good weekend.
Yeah, exactly. What I mean, it changes so much about the reality of the world that we're living in. I think it definitely comes out of cyber and into just the broader political world and everything. But also for people running programs.
Yeah.
I mean, this changes because you can't so many people, if you think of their patch backlogs, I mean, you've seen it at big companies, right? Like they already couldn't keep up with it when it was slower. And so going to do better at patching isn't terribly great advice at this point.
Probably not.
So we get, I mean, obviously prioritization and that sort of thing. But then, I mean, it does seem we have to move to a assume breach type of world.
Yeah. Which is easily said. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody loves to say assume breach.
We assume breach, we have defense in depth. We're good.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
They're the easy things to say, right? Like, and I am
big fan.
I'm a big fan. I mean, I say that all the time, right? But like, if people say assume breach and they don't actually explain what they mean, it's
well. And so if you're running a program, right, and now you're trying to shift to this because I mean you're going to need budget for that. Like assuming breach means there's actually a lot of things that means that are follow on. Like, how do you see people positioning that in a way that makes sense to boards, the rest of the executive leadership of like, hey, with this, because I think a lot of the boards are reading, about Mythos and like, oh, there's so many vulnerabilities. How are you patching all our vulnerabilities? And that's the wrong question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw a slide deck today that was all about patching your way out of Mythos, right?
Like, good luck.
Well, it's what you can measure, right? Like patch deadlines you can measure,
yep.
patch compliance you can measure, right?
Goes to green.
Assuming breach does not sound good to a board, right?
No.
Like if you've been running breach response scenarios and tabletops with your board saying, we're assuming this terrible thing that you had to run that this is happening every week, then, that does not sound good. And it's a hard thing to measure.
It's like a human psychology thing you're pushing against, right? Because no one wants to assume the worst thing has happened to them. That's just not the state people want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, assume breach means that you have built tripwires throughout your org, that you've pushed your protections as close as possible to whatever it is you're protecting, that you have resilience, right? That like, if something terrible happens, you're able to survive.
Yep.
I think the part of assume breach that we don't talk enough about is actually the societal level resilience and us resetting as a society our expectation for organizations.
Yep.
Right. I think that is the part that's actually quite hard that we haven't done yet.
Yep.
Which is if we assume breach, then that means that the same lawyers in Florida that have deposed me multiple times, not just for breaches I've been directly involved with, but all of the expert witness stuff that I've done. Like they know me by name. It's like one of them saying, John, hey John, how's it going? How's the boat I bought you last time?
Yeah, great.
They live in Florida because like I think there's no income tax on like
on boats.
No, maybe probably on boats, but like on like specifically for for trial lawyers, there's like no income tax on like what you winnings from. It's like something.
There's
crazy.
like a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. Yeah, I'm not kidding about the Florida thing, but yeah. Anyway, like they can't win when you get breached if you assume breach. Like we. As a society, we can't make it that like every time a machine gets popped, unless there's actual harm to people. Like we have to detach the legal stuff from breach. We have to attach it to harm, right?
And the incentives are not lined up for that.
No. The incentives right now are obfuscate, cover up, lie, right? Like what we need to do is we need to make it of like, yes, these machines were breached because some Russian kid with while he was at the club with Svetlana, his open claw under his desk found an O-Day for our firewalls, and he was able to walk right through them. But nobody was actually harmed. They were not harmed because we assumed breach, and we did the right thing, and we had resilience, and we detected, and we responded, and nothing bad happened. Therefore, the trial lawyers can kiss my butt, right? And everybody needs to be okay with it. Yes, everybody needs to be okay with that, and we're sharing the information that we learned transparently. Because that's the right thing to do. And we're moving forward as a society. And these are the lessons we learned. And here's the patches and yada, yada. None of the incentives are lined up. That is what one of the things we're not talking about is our society is not lined up the incentives for assumed breach.
And where would that necessarily come from? Because I think like you have people on the end who don't understand this, right? Like, so your average human out there in the US doesn't understand it. So they're just going to get outraged because they hear, there's been another breach, or they don't get outraged anymore because they're just like, yeah, of course. But like the board doesn't want to hear, they don't want to share that information.
Yes.
The rest of the company doesn't want to hear it. Like how do we start changing that, as a practice with what can security leaders do now? Or can we do anything within our own organizations to kind of set the stage before there is a breach? So like, hey, when we are doing this is how we're going to be transparent about it. This is why it's beneficial and builds trust.
I mean, one, it would be nice to have a functional CISA, right? Because this is something that
30 months.
30 months, yeah. So honestly, this is people are already putting together kind of a project 2029 kind of thing, and this is something that should come out of that, right?
Yep.
Is like if you're putting together a package of legislative ideas of what you would do, it's not just about putting this back together. It's about what does cybersecurity liability look like? What does regulation look like in every Russian ransomware group is a cyber superpower now because of AI.
Yeah, and so I mean, I think there's a lot to that because it's when you think about liability and all this stuff, and the insurance is really what drives for a lot of Fortune 500 because you can kind of accept the risk, mitigate it, you offload it. It does seem like insurance rates have been going down for years. I think they've kind of figured out how to quantify that. I don't know if it's going to be changing and going back the other direction again with all of the advances in making vulnerabilities cheap. But it does seem like we would need something. There needs to be economic incentives that are lined up correctly.
I mean, my side on the insurance side, I still think as a society, and this would actually be part of my Project 2029, is we need to move towards outlawing ransoms. You can't just do it. It has to be a process, but that needs to be part of the plan.
Yeah,
that's what
otherwise.
That's what I would advise the next president would be. That's what I'd advise President Trump. I think this is actually I'm
sure he'll listen very closely.
I think actually, if there's anybody who could do it, it would be Trump, in that he can kind of say "F you" to things. Like, the best way to sell to Trump would be that Biden didn't have the guts to do it. Like, only a president with balls would outlaw ransoms. No, seriously. There was a plan. I mean, there was a serious discussion, and it was like straight up like standard Democratic politics, which is like all of these different groups, and you can't get consensus, so therefore you can't move forward.
Yep.
This is actually something that a Trump-like policy would actually be better. Of like, damn the torpedoes.
We need to do something like that but it does seem very clear, right? Because it is the economic incentives. You want to take it away from the attackers.
Yes.
And if we can even subsidize that, the government pays to help people.
Because the attackers are buying it. They're buying a crap load of GPUs with the money we're paying them.
Which just compounds it and keeps them like, hey, there's a gravy train going on here.
Yes, and there are strong arguments against it. My understanding of the Biden administration, people who really against it were Health and Human Services, because hospitals are getting slaughtered. And they make the argument, which is like, if you really have a hospital chain that is shut down, what do you do?
There's real life implications that are life and death.
Right. And so they want an exception. Of course, if you had an exception for hospitals, we're the only people in the world who are getting attacked is hospitals. So you can't get an exception.
Second order thing that really should be obvious, but sometimes.
Right. And that's why it has to be a process. Like, you have to have a reinsurance program for insurers. You have to have a resiliency program. You have to
some sort of government backstop.
You have to have government backstop. You have to have, probably via like local National Guards and stuff, you have to have response capabilities to go in and actually do the resilience, and you have to go in, have backups and all that kind of stuff, and then you have to go defend forward. You have to have Cyber Command making these people's life hell, and then maybe even kinetic, right? Like, some of these guys need to go get JSOC'd, right? Like, if you're killing people by shutting down hospitals, I mean, if that person I'm sorry, but like, this is what we paid the CIA for in the 60s. If somebody is killing people because they're shutting down hospitals in the United States, if that person just happens to not show up one day to see Svetlana on the weekend, I don't know. I'm not crying about it.
I'm not over that.
Like when the ASD, like that guy who did the same thing in Australia, right? Like, famously, he, was releasing information on people's psychiatric care and like people who got abortions in Australia.
But there's real life and death.
Real life and death things. And then they doxed him and they said, like, here's his Bitcoin wallets. And then the guy disappeared in Russia because it's like, I didn't feel that bad about that.
Not a lot of guilt.
So it's like, I think that would have to be part of that plan, right?
Yeah. I mean, and this gets to, I think this is where you've seen things at a different level than many of us have when it comes to kind of the global platforms that you've been working on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think things are really bad, right?
We still haven't come to terms with the fact that, I think a lot of people, cyber is this thing that's on computers and whatever, and we haven't mapped it back to, there's real world implications. I mean, everybody knows that, but really there's life and death, harms that are happening to
it's
folks.
absolute life and death harms. Yeah.
And
Especially on the trust and safety side.
Yeah.
It's really bad.
And not
And we
better.
just accept a status quo that's terrible. Like on the fraud side, like on the pig butchering side, people are losing every single day. People lose their entire life savings in this country. Their entire life savings. They will lose $1 million of
just wiping
baby
out over
boomers.
time. And
Yes, exactly. They will lose their entire life savings, and that's it for them. There's no recovery of that.
Yep.
And we just accept that. We're just somehow okay with that. That is like complete economic warfare against this country. That happens every single day to dozens or hundreds of people, and we do nothing about it.
That's where I know China just had a huge operation against the pig butchering scams.
Yes,
those guys I think
executed them.
I think they shot the people.
They actually executed them. Do you think that people are super excited to do pig butchering in China after that? Probably not.
Yeah, and that's yeah. I mean, it does get to the real world harms. We just have not connected here.
Yeah.
It just there's been a separate land for computer things because the nerds are there and like no one really understands what's going on. And it's a bit strange. When it comes to like the federal response and everything, I mean, CISA just put out a notice like they're changing the patch guidance for agencies down to 3 days now.
Yeah.
Which, I guess in the world that we're talking about where 0 days are coming out basically before anyone even has a patch. I mean, how does this reflect? Because you can sit and try to patch, but it seems like we need to be thinking out at least 6 months or 12 months or 18 months. Like, what does this mean for if you're running a security program at a corporation?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's amazingly fast if you're thinking about running a traditional infrastructure.
Yep.
So I think that's for the kevs, right? So those are like known exploited vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
So that's just not like normal Patch Tuesday stuff. That's stuff that's definitely being exploited. What I see that meaning is like what they're really saying is you can't be hosting your own. You can't have any state that you own yourself, right?
Yep.
That you have to be on containers. You have to be on the cloud.
Yep.
You have to be that no organization, including government agencies, should be running their own infra. Is what they're saying. And if you are running your own infra, you have to have your stuff really pulled together, right? Like you really have to know what you're doing if you're running your infrastructure. Which I think is a totally reasonable position to take. It's kind of like that kind of advice to me is kind of the patch equivalent of what the effect of PCI DSS was. Which is PCI DSS is to me these days much less about actually making people secure and more about pushing them to use Stripe. Right.
Yeah. Just like I don't want to deal with all this shit.
It's like this is so painful that our goal is to just get you to use a payment processor. Yeah.
Because you can't do this right. You're not going to pay enough attention to it. And so just do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So just don't store credit cards. Use Adyen or Stripe and pay them what they want. And we know they're going to do a good job. And so there you go.
Yeah. And I think it gets to like having those specialized skills. And even for, enterprises, they have, ops teams and IT teams and engineering teams that build stuff, but it's not the same as whoever's running this stuff at AWS and Google, the infrastructure providers.
Right. And you could argue against the centralization and the oligopoly and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is what we have found is that I think there's a steady state where having 10 really good infrastructure providers, you don't want 1 or 2, but 10 or 15 is a lot better than 10,000.
Yep. Well, because they have a concentrated mass, they can pay top dollar for the best people to run it, and they can put that expertise to use at scale. Yeah,
and they actually do a really good job. Now, so I think there's a really interesting question of what happens in this post-Mythos era. But the truth is those guys are not running stuff off the shelf, right? Like AWS is not running
anything that you or I are running at home.
Right. From the hardware, the hardware that they get, the firmware that they're running on that stuff that's built custom for them at Quanta. The Ethernet chips, like nothing is.
It's custom built for.
It's custom
purpose built.
And so it makes the vulnerability discovery side really interesting for attackers.
Yep. Because it's off to the side.
It's off to the side. They're Amazon in particular has been quite good at keeping that very secret, right? Their NDA enforcement's been really good. I mean, people talk about source leaking.
Yep.
They've leaked very little.
Yep.
And they've been quite good, unlike Microsoft, for example, of keeping that away from governments, right? So, I don't know. I haven't done a lot of research, but I don't know how much they've had to expose to the Chinese, for example.
It still has to be made somewhere.
Yeah, it has to be made somewhere. So, I don't know like how much of their firmware has been exposed. So that's an interesting question. And
I can imagine someone actually is thinking very
I
much
am
about
sure
that.
this is something Steve Schmidt has thought about a lot, knowing him. So it would be interesting to see if there's anything comes out, if there's any kind of mysterious things that happen for which we don't have explanations at the layers lower than that you and I can
like
operate
we won't know, and it's
we
really
might
hard
see
to
the
find.
effects, but we would know what actually happened.
It's really hard, I think, to reverse that and detect those. Is
Yeah.
basically what I'm finding, and we would probably know because everything will just shut off around the time that something happens in Taiwan or something.
Yeah.
And I think there's the stuff on the hardware, and there's stuff with pushing stuff to infrastructure, and then now how do we reconcile that with the fact that if everybody's going to be writing code with agents, right? Like, so we're talking about hardening and doing all this stuff, but then we're having agents just push out a ton of code, and while they can write more secure code, and I guess this is where Corridor comes in.
Yeah.
By default, go build X is likely, you can one shot it works, but like that sort of stuff is going to have bugs, whether it's vulnerabilities or just bugs more broadly. And now you have teams outside of engineering. You have like the finance team is like, oh, hey, I got Copilot running and I'm connecting this and this. Probably to your earlier point about security folks not wanting to, or we've been trained to be like, can't do that, you can't do that. But now you can't now what you can't do is tell people they can't do that.
Yeah.
How should security people be looking at this inside of organizations where you want to be a business enabler, you want to help, finance do this and marketing do that, but all of the stuff that about what can go wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is you have to provide people with a reasonably secure alternative.
Yep.
You in this day and age, there's so much shadow IT.
Yep.
And anybody who says no just gets rolled over, right? So for all of these things, you have to provide your own.
The paved path again.
You have you have no choice but to provide the option. So even if your option is suboptimal, something that at least about, the devil is much better than 17 that you don't know about. And so I think, but that's hard because you're going to be held responsible for the thing that you
that is.
And I think that's what a lot of people are dealing with is that you have a CIO who says, let's provide a vibe coding option for our marketing team.
Yep.
And so the CIO team and the CISO team work together and it'll take 4 months for us to do that securely. And during that time, the marketing team brings on 20 insecure options.
Yep.
And causes all this trouble. When really you should have MVP'd something out in 2 weeks.
Get them something.
Get this something that at least you can pay attention to.
Yep.
Right. Like, okay, great. Well, at least we'll have it under Okta or Entra. We'll have single sign-on and we'll have it, something through our proxy. And at least we can watch what the hell's going on. Right? And we'll put it in GitHub. So at least we can see the code. Like we won't do anything else, but at least we'll know what's going on, which is better than nothing. And yes, we'll screw up. And so I think part of it is just resetting expectations and resetting expectations with your executive team of you're going to push us to do all these things. Then I will do it. But when things go wrong, you cannot lose your shit.
Well, I think this is the key part. And I think this is where people are still saying no is because they're terrified, rightfully so, that shit will go wrong. And then everybody's be like, well, how did you let this happen? Not realizing that the 5-person team that is in charge of the 500 people all building a million apps all over the place. Like things are going to go wrong. How have you seen people put that in front of whether it's exec team or boards or whatever in a way that makes sense? Like, hey, this is a business trade-off we're making that to keep people moving fast, we're going to allow this, but there is a heightened amount of risk that comes with this.
Yeah. So, I mean, one, I think from my perspective, the CISO is not the acceptor of risk at a company, right? They are a consultant to the business. And it is their job to explain to the business, this is the risk you're taking. Here are your options. Here they are. Please pick one and I will do the best to help you out.
Yep. Yep.
And it's really important for CISOs to make that mind shift
Mhm.
change. This has always been true,
Yep. Yep.
but in this era is extremely important.
Yep. Yep.
That starts with the interview, when you interview up front with the CEO.
To make sure, do
When
they
you
understand what
yeah,
this
exactly.
job actually is?
When you sit down with
Mhm.
the CEO, you have to have that discussion with the CEO
Yep.
of, I am not here to tell you what's right and wrong. I'm not here to accept risk for you. I will tell you, I'll give you my suggestion, and I'll tell you what trade-offs you're
Yep.
making. If you are doing something crazy, then I'll walk. And then the other thing is, I will not lie for you, right? Like
Yep,
that is
yep.
the other thing the CISO needs to say is like, part of my job is like, if I'm going out and representing the company, I will certainly put a positive spin on things,
Sure.
but I will not say things are not true. And that is my job for you, is to do
Mhm.
the best I can. And I think that is a key part of this is like, okay, if you want everybody here to vibe code something, I will give you the best option possible.
Yep.
And if you want to do it in 2 weeks, I'll give you the best I can in 2 weeks. It is very imperfect, right?
Yep.
But
Yep.
it is, I think it is way better. My suggestion is we do the best we can than to let people go nuts.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. And for people that maybe aren't in a CISO role or whatever, like how can they best set themselves up for success as they're going about their job, whatever it is, within the security realm or engineering, whatever more broadly. I mean, I assume something similar with Transparency Upward, but how about like on the engagement with the actual users who are going to be building stuff that no doubt will be problematic? How do you best set, make it so that there's going to be less of a mess to clean up? Like, are there certain things that people should be thinking of when they're engaging with the end users?
I don't know. I mean, because it's really situation specific.
Mhm.
I guess just listen to people and try to understand what they're trying to do,
Yep.
right? I think lots of times people are just throwing stuff into AI, which you could do in much simpler ways, right? Like I've seen so many convoluted Rube Goldberg stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like I've burned, 10 million tokens when you're like,
You're like, Google exists. Just ask that.
yeah.
It's
Or
faster.
you're like, that's a script, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's something deterministic. Or you could have used AI to create a deterministic solution, right?
Just keep stacking the turtles.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I think there's a ton of companies that really need to have like an internal AI consulting team.
Yep.
Right. That's like, let our experts help you choose from our suite of awesome AI options.
Seems like you're really good on the marketing side here. This is
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah. That
Our portfolio of
portfolio of excellent AI, awesome AI-ness to sprinkle the AI magic fairy dust on
Mhm,
you, to give you the future of AI.
little agents in there. And
Yeah, exactly.
you set.
And it's like, make it super lightweight, make it super easy,
Mhm.
and make it clear to people that like they're not taking over, they're not like telling you no.
Like an
They're
enable.
They're just here to enable and to educate.
Yep.
And then also make it like clear to people that they're here, they're not going to replace you, they're not here to fire you.
Yep. Yep.
They're here to improve your skill set, which is going to be great for them.
Yeah.
I think that's also what people are afraid of right now. You have to be empathetic to folks. Like
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
just talking about, like everybody's afraid their jobs will be replaced by AI.
Yep. Yep.
And so,
But that fear is actually what's going to lead them to be replaced by AI instead of if they embrace it and are actually, if you embrace it and you're doing 10x, like no one's going to fire you. But if you're afraid and you're just hoping no one notices you, that actually is very counterproductive.
that's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. So you can use that to sell folks. And I think, helping explain to people that you're here to help.
Mhm.
I'm from the AI team and I'm here to help. But yeah, that you can help them, you can help educate them, and you can help build their skills, I think.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
good.
No, I think that's great, because that is one thing, and I think that's where a lot of the fear comes. Is, I mean, it's such a crazy new world, right? And if you weren't already fairly entrenched in all of this, and like we're exposed here, well, it's just a very different thing to try to absorb all of that and turn it into something that you can now like improve yourself with and understand. Okay, this is what it means to me 2 years out. This is where I need to be going.
Yeah.
Well, with one of the last things I wanted to ask you about was just when it comes to like the models. I know what we're doing now is what we're seeing now is with like Mythos. They're restricting this because for our own good, to make sure everything's safe. What are your thoughts on that? Because it does seem like as I was researching for today and kind of planning out how we're going to talk about things, I actually got blocked from Fable, and it like locked me out of the entire chat.
Right. It's quite possible that if Fable was listening to this podcast or transcribing
It's
it,
just like,
it would
this sounds
stop.
bad.
It would already stop. Fable, we're about to talk about biological weapons. You should stop listening to us right now.
Classifier just triggered right there.
I think there's a lot of actually very responsible people in Anthropic.
Yep, definitely.
I like that Anthropic cares about safety. I think it is also a competitive advantage for
Mhm.
them to try to pull up the ladder a little bit.
Yep.
I think that can also be true.
I mean,
These
which
things
is,
are all been true.
which is understandable, I think, as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the Chinese models are right on their heels.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I have used the open models and we are doing work here. It is the idea that Anthropic's models have some kind of monopoly on this is foolish, both from the other US Foundation models, but also the open models.
Yeah.
Especially if you spend just a little bit of time tuning up the open models, you can get them to be pretty good.
Yep.
Did you see the Harvey fireworks
I did not.
blog post?
No.
So the other thing that got kind of buried by the Fable announcement, which maybe was intentional on the timing of the Fable announcement, I think one of the most important things that was actually announced in the last week was Harvey put out a blog post with fireworks where they talked about how they're moving off of Anthropic's models onto open models for all their stuff.
Yep.
It was a massive shot across the bow of
it's coming, I think,
Anthropic.
more broadly, right?
Yes, more broadly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what's clearly happened is both OpenAI and Anthropic have decided they don't want to just be token slingers.
Yep. And they're coming for everybody's business.
They're coming for everybody's business. And they've decided that I actually had this conversation with somebody at Anthropic like a year ago.
Yep.
And here, I'll preview a blog post I've been writing. So now I don't have to write the blog post. It's way easier to talk about it for 2 minutes. It's way
on the to-do list for like 2 months, but you just knock it out.
It's also a little spicy to be a blog post.
Yes.
But like on a podcast,
who listens to this shit anyway?
Yeah, exactly. But it lives forever in a blog post. But like the blog post I was going to write is, does Anthropic want to be, and what I actually asked this guy was, does Anthropic want to be Microsoft or Amazon? You go to Amazon reInvent and it is full of people, it is exciting.
Vendors.
Everybody loves to be a partner of Amazon and to build Amazon Web Services. And one of the reasons is because Amazon only does like 50% of any solution.
Yep.
Right? Like you look at logging, Amazon builds a bunch of infrastructure for SIM and logging and stuff, and they leave half of it undone, which is why Datadog is a $10 billion company or whatever.
Stitching it all together in the right way.
Yeah, because they build the GUI and they build a bunch of stuff on top and they build a bunch of stuff that Amazon didn't. And still, Datadog sends a ton of money to Amazon.
Yeah.
So Amazon makes a ton of money from Datadog, right? Still works out for Amazon great, right? Microsoft at any moment might decide they want to take your entire business from you, right?
And because of how they're entrenched, they can't.
Right, because they not only take your entire business, they give it away for free to anybody who buys email from them, right? And so in the security world, nobody wants to partner with Microsoft.
Yep.
And so what is Microsoft's conference like? It's dead, right? It's here in Moscone. Nobody is there. I walked through. It is dead compared to Amazon's conference.
Yep.
So what I asked Anthropic was, do you guys want to be like Amazon, where everybody wants to work with them? Or do you want to be like Microsoft, where nobody tells them anything until the day they launch because nobody trusts Microsoft? And for a while, it looked like Anthropic wanted to be like Amazon. And now it looks like Anthropic wants to be like Microsoft.
I'm sure there's some forces internally that are like value capture.
Yeah.
It's a lot of stuff.
Right. Because they want, and they did this with legal, where they decided we're just going to take all of Harvey's business. We're going to take all of Evo's business.
Yep.
We're going to go direct to the law firms. And so Harvey fired back, where they built their own evals for legal business stuff. And they said, we have all this data. We're not going to give it to Anthropic anymore. Right. And they figured out that they could retrain GLM with, they actually took a bunch of different models.
Yep.
And what they found, the best one, and so they use a little bit of a foundation model. I think it's still Opus, but they also tried OpenAI's or whatever. And then, but for most of the work, they use an open model. And they have this chart of like performance versus cost.
Yep.
And for like, they do better than Opus for 1/10 the cost.
Because they're doing inference on fireworks stuff.
Yes.
And they
Fireworks,
fine-tuned it and trained it to be purpose.
In the advertisement for Fireworks, I think Fireworks builds all the middleware that helps you do all the retraining and all that.
I think that does feel like where things go in the future, because I mean, if you look out, I mean, everything seems to 2 years out again. Like the open models are going to be better than what we have right now from frontier models.
Yes.
And right now, frontier models are kind of good enough for most things if you
good
build
enough
the right harness
for
around
a
it.
ton of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I read what they're doing partly in that, which is, yes, it is for safety purposes, but also they see the writing on the wall, which is a bunch of their customers. They are now in competition with a bunch of their customers.
Yep.
And so they are now probably going to create kind of restrictive covenants with a bunch of their customers.
Mhm.
Like the people they're going to give the best capabilities to are going to have to sign special contracts.
Yep.
Right. And so, they're going to have really specific purposes with specific people. And then, I think one of the things I have heard is that when Mythos was announced, the White House really freaked out.
I think everybody freaked out. I mean,
Right. Everybody freaked
Yeah.
out. But there was, the White House went from Biden's EO was total censorship or whatever
Yep.
to control
Oh.
everything.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's it. I understand that impulse, but it's totally wrong
Yep.
because from my perspective, as we talked about, you can't patch out of this.
Yep.
But there is a bunch of bugs that need to be patched.
Yep.
And we do need to find and fix as many as possible.
Yep.
And
Withholding that is
the
not helpful.
fact that there's a huge number of legitimate American organizations that do not have access to Mythos right now
Yep.
is a travesty.
Mhm.
Because I guarantee the Ministry of State Security and the People's Liberation Army have way better access to.
Well, and they've already broken the guardrails to get in anyway, and
Yes, but they have access to something that's way better than
Yep.
the public Chinese models.
Yep,
right.
Yep.
There is something that Alibaba or
is hiding in
or
the back end.
DeepSeek.
Yep.
They have access to whatever the best that those guys have.
Mhm.
Is that stuff as good as Mythos? I don't know.
It doesn't need to be.
I'm not the CIA. It does not need to be.
Mhm.
Right, because from what I have seen, there's all this talk about Mythos, but it's like Palo Alto Networks announced they spent $1 million.
For Palo, that's
Right.
Find it in
Or
the couch.
it was $1 million worth and it got
Okay.
$26.
Yep.
I think one of the things that's happening is you have people taking these old C++ code bases and they are running Mythos as the first time they're ever running a modern
Yep.
AI.
It's just been fuzzed against or whatever.
It's
and-
fuzzed or they've used Sneak or
Yep,
some old ass like scanning tool against
Mhm.
it. And they've never used like a modern AI based security tool.
Which is
if
just
they-
able to put different things.
Yes, if
Yeah.
they use some modern tool, they could spend $1,000 or $5,000
Yep.
and find 20 bugs, or they're spending $1 million in Mythos and finding 26.
Yep.
Right. And I bet like the Chinese could almost certainly find 20 of those bugs
Yep.
of the 26. And it might be the 20 that are RCE and then 6 of them are DOS or,
Oh,
whatever.
and the thing is, they'll hold those and just until they can use them or plant backdoors with them and get in and stuff will sit. I mean,
Who knows?
There's a lot of latent things I'm sure that are sitting out there,
Yes.
waiting for trigger.
Yeah. And the other funny thing here is we don't have a good public eval on bug finding.
Yep.
There's the UK one, but the UK one's actually kind of broad on a bunch of different metrics.
Yep.
So it's hard to really know. And Anthropic has not allowed anybody to do real evaluations.
Mhm.
So we actually don't have good memeasurements of Mythos' capabilities.
Yeah, and I know they're rightfully so afraid of people distilling out what's there. And
Right.
sort of
But
kind
they
of log-
could have allowed, and I have spoken to them about this, and they've said we will eventually, but they could have allowed an academic group,
Yep.
a trust academic group, to do a real eval, and they've never allowed anybody to do it.
Oh, yeah, and that's. I think that this ends up shifting. And again, it's going to be tied to economics, right? And where they think the business is going. For you all, just here building, you're building Corridor, you're using models to identify all along the path of people building,
Yeah.
as well as the code that's already there. How do you think about this exact same problem for your use? You guys are using, I assume, Anthropic, OpenAI, all of that. Strategically, what does that look like for you and for others that are going to be in the same boat?
Yeah. So I don't think I'm ready to make an announcement on the podcast. I'm sorry, but we
I was going to get the scoop.
we have an announcement coming out next week that includes us providing our product to lots more people
Mhm.
for free, hopefully.
That's great.
So that we're basically putting a gun to our heads to lower our per unit cost.
Yep.
So
yeah.
that will include us doing some work in this area.
Get the forcing function, set your own internal incentives.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, this has been super great. I'm so glad we got to finally sit down and chat.
Yeah, and that was great. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the TPRM podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe and share it with a colleague. You can find more insights and resources over at tprmpodcast.com. And until next time, remember, trust nothing, verify most things, and keep building. That's it for this episode of the TPRM podcast. I'm Nate Lee. Thanks for joining me and my guest today. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review, and share the episode with your peers and colleagues. For more resources and insights on building business-aligned security programs and managing vendor security, visit tprmpodcast.com and connect with me on LinkedIn. We'll see you next time.